Last night I dreamed of my mother. She was standing in the kitchen, the way she always stood, one hand on the back of a chair, the other resting on her apron. And she spoke to me. She said, "Come, esse, Hannah. This esse is faddish. Come eat, Hannah. Supper's ready." And I answered her. In the dream, I opened my mouth and I answered in Pennsylvania Dutch, without thinking, without translating, as if I'd never left, as if 63 years in the English world, college, a career, a different name, a different life, none of it had happened. In the dream, I was still hers. I was still plain. I was still home. Then I woke up in an apartment in Columbus, Ohio, alone, 82 years old. And the first sound I heard was the hum of the refrigerator, and I thought, that's the loneliest sound in the world. Because at home, at my real home, the first sound in the morning was always my father's boots on the kitchen floor, and the clink of a lantern being lit. I left the Amish when I was 19 years old. I've spent 63 years building a life in a world I chose, and I don't regret the choice. But I need you to understand something that nobody tells you about leaving. Not the books, not the documentaries, not the Englishes who say, "Good for you, you got out." You can leave the Amish, but the Amish never leaves you. It lives in the place where language lives, the place beneath thought, the place where you dream. I was born in 1942 on a farm in Holmes County, Ohio. 60 acres of good soil, a white clapboard house, and a barn that my grandfather and 11 other men raised in a single day. That's how it was then. That's how it still is. You need a barn, your neighbors bring hammers, nobody sends an invoice. My father was a quiet man, not hard, not cold, just quiet the way men in our world often are. He spoke when speaking was necessary. He sang in church. He prayed aloud before meals. And every evening, after the last cow was milked and the last lantern was dimmed, he'd sit on the porch and say one sentence to my mother. "Swar ein guter Tag." It was a good day, that was enough. She'd nod, and the day was done. My mother was warmth itself. She was the kind of woman who could tell you what was wrong, just by listening to the way you set your fork down at supper. She made shoofly pie every Saturday without fail, and she sang hymns from the Ausbund while she kneaded bread. Those long, slow hymns that stretch a single verse across 10 minutes, as if time itself was bowing its head. I had 4 sisters and 2 brothers. I was the middle child, which meant I was both invisible and essential, the one who could be trusted to do the chores nobody wanted, the one who watched everything and said little. But I'll tell you what nobody knew about me, what I hid the way other girls might hide a letter from a boy. I was hungry, not for food. We had plenty of food. I was hungry for words. Our one-room schoolhouse went through 8th grade. That was it. After that, you were done. You went home to the farm, to the kitchen, to the work that God had set aside for you. For most of the children, that was enough. The world inside those 60 acres was the whole world. And the idea of needing more was as foreign as a television set. But I couldn't stop reading. Our teacher, Sarah Yoder, noticed it. She'd catch me reading ahead 3 chapters in the arithmetic book. She'd find me at recess with a geography text, tracing the outlines of countries I couldn't pronounce. One afternoon she said, "Hannah, you have a fast mind. That's a gift, but a gift can also be a burden if there's no place to use it." I didn't understand what she meant then. I understand it now. I've spent 63 years understanding it. The last day of 8th grade, I walked home from that schoolhouse and I cried. Not the way children cry when something hurts, the way a person cries when a door closes and they know, in their bones, in that deep place where knowing lives, that it was the only door that mattered. When I turned 16 and Rumspringa began, the other youngie wanted to ride in cars. They wanted to hear radios, wear English clothes, taste the freedom they'd been told to fear. I wanted a library card. I found the public library in Millersburg. It was a small brick building on the main street, nothing special to anyone else. But to me it was a cathedral. I walked through those doors and I stood in the middle of all those shelves and I couldn't breathe. Not because I was afraid. because I was so full of wanting that my chest couldn't hold it. I started going every week. I'd drive the buggy to the edge of town, tie the horse at the hitching post outside the hardware store, and walk the 3 blocks to the library like I was walking towards something holy. I read everything: history, science, poetry. I read about women who went to universities, who studied medicine, who wrote books that strangers read. I read about a world where asking questions wasn't a sign of pride. It was expected, encouraged, rewarded. And every book I read made the farm a little smaller. I hid the books under my mattress. I read by moonlight when my sisters were sleeping, holding the pages up to the window. I was living 2 lives, one in Pennsylvania Dutch and one in English, and the seam between them was getting thinner every day. But here's the thing: I love being Amish. I love my mother's kitchen, the hymns, and the stillness, the simplicity. I loved the way the whole community showed up when someone was hurting. Prayers so earnest they'd make your throat ache. I wasn't running from something. I was running towards something, because if I'd hated my life, leaving would have been easy. But I didn't hate it. I just couldn't fit inside it anymore, the way a tree can't fit inside the seed it came from. I was baptized at 18. My parents wanted it. The community expected it. And part of me, the part that still loved the hymns, that still wanted to belong, that part wanted it too. I knelt on the floor of the Stoltzfus farmhouse during the church service, and the bishop poured water over my head, and I made a vow before God and the Gmei, the congregation, that I would live according to the Ordnung for the rest of my days. I meant it. I meant every word, and then I broke it. 1 year later, I sat at that same kitchen table across from my parents, and I told them I was leaving. I told them I wanted to get my high school equivalency, that I wanted to go to college, that I needed to learn the way other people needed to eat, and that I could no more stop this hunger than I could stop my own heartbeat. My father didn't yell. He set both hands flat on the table, those wide, rough hands that had milked 10,000 cows, that had built fences and dug graves and held each of his children the moment they were born, and he pressed them against the wood as if he was trying to keep the table from floating away. Or maybe himself. He said, "You were baptized, Hannah." "I know, Father, I know." "Do you know what this means?" "Yeah, Dad, I know what it means. Meidung, shunning, complete and total, no shared meals, no buggy rides. No one speaks to you, no one sits with you, no one touches your hand or holds your baby, or meets your eyes at the market. You become a ghost inside the only world you've ever known." My mother didn't speak. She sat in her chair with her hands folded in her lap, the way she always held them during sermons, still patient, yielded, submission to God's will, but her lip was trembling, not much, just enough that I could see it because I was her daughter. The bishop came the following Tuesday. They sat in the living room and they asked me to reconsider. They read scripture about the prodigal. They were not cruel men. They believed they were saving my soul. I've spent 63 years wondering. I left on a Friday morning in March of 1961. The ground was still half frozen. I packed 1 bag with 2 dresses and a hairbrush, and a Bible my mother had given me for my baptism with my name written inside the cover, Hannah Troyer. I walked to the door. My sisters would not look at me. My brothers had gone to the barn. My father sat in his chair facing the window, his back to me, and he did not turn around. But my mother followed me to the door. She didn't speak. She couldn't. The Ordnung was already in effect. To speak to me now, to say I love you or goodbye, it would have been a violation. She would have had to answer for it on her knees before the whole Gmei, so she didn't speak. She reached into her pocket and pressed something into my hand. It was a square of fabric, blue cotton with tiny white flowers. It was a piece of the quilt that had covered my bed since I was a child. She had cut it from the corner closest to where my head rested every night. That was her goodbye, a scrap of cloth, no words, no embrace, just a piece of the thing that had kept me warm, placed in my hand by the woman who had made it. I walked down that lane, and I did not look back, because I knew that if I turned around and saw her standing in that doorway, I would never leave. And the part of me that lived in libraries and books and questions that had no place in a farmhouse kitchen, that part would die. I built a life. I went to college, a small state school, nothing grand, but to me it was the library multiplied by 1,000. I became a teacher. I taught 8th grade English for 31 years. I stood in front of classrooms full of children who had no idea that their teacher had once cried on the last day of 8th grade because she thought learning was over. That part of me survived after all. I married an Englishman named David, a good man. He never once made me feel strange for who I was, even when I woke up speaking Pennsylvania Dutch in my sleep. We had 2 children. They knew almost nothing about my past. I told them I grew up on a farm. I didn't have the words, not in English anyway. That's the thing nobody warns you about. You'll spend the rest of your life translating yourself. Every thought, every prayer, it rises up in one language and you convert it. You become your own interpreter. After a while, you forget which version is the original and which is the copy. But your dreams don't translate. They stay in the first language, the mother tongue, the Muttersprach. 23 years after I left, my mother died. I learned about it from a letter addressed to a Mennonite woman who had quietly kept me informed, passing mercies across the border between my 2 worlds. I drove 4 hours back to Holmes County, putting on the plainest clothes I owned, a dark dress, no jewelry. I parked on the road near the cemetery and stood at the edge. I could see them. My father, his beard fully white, my sisters in their black bonnets, my brothers and their wives, children I didn't recognize, nieces, nephews, born into a world where my name was not spoken. They stood around the grave like a wall of dark cloth. Not one of them looked in my direction. Meidung, even in grief the rules held. I stood there for the entire service. I could hear the minister's voice carrying across the grass, but I couldn't make out the words, just the cadence. That slow, rising and falling cadence of High German prayer that I hadn't heard in 2 decades, but that my body remembered, the way your lungs remember how to breathe. And then it was over. The group began to move, and I turned to walk back to my car. That's when I felt a hand on mine. An old woman, Ruth Hirschberger, my mother's closest friend since girlhood. She must have been 75 then. Small as a sparrow, her face a map of every season she'd lived through. She had broken from the group and walked all the way across the cemetery to where I was standing. She didn't speak a single word. She took my hand in both of hers and she held it, 10 seconds, maybe 15. Her hands were rough and warm and they smelled like bread dough and wood smoke and everything I had ever lost. Then she let go. She turned around. She walked back to the others. No one stopped her. No one said a word. 15 seconds. That was all. But it said everything that 63 years of silence could not. It said, she loved you. She never stopped, and neither did I. And I am breaking the rules right now because some things are bigger than rules. That night in a motel room outside Millersburg, I dreamed in Pennsylvania Dutch for the first time in years. My mother was sitting in her kitchen piecing a quilt. She looked up at me and said, "Du bist gekommen." You came, just that, you came. And I woke up with my face wet and my hand clutching that square of blue fabric I'd carried in every purse, every pocket, every suitcase for 23 years. I'm 82 now. David is gone. 6 years this April. My children are grown. They have children of their own who call me Grandma and have never seen a buggy except in pictures. I live in a small apartment in Columbus with a refrigerator that hums and a television I rarely watch and more books than the Millersburg Library ever had. I got what I wanted, the education, the knowledge, the freedom to ask any question and follow it wherever it led. I read thousands of books. I taught hundreds of children. I built a life that my 19-year-old self would have been proud of, and I dream in Pennsylvania Dutch. Every night, my unconscious mind still speaks the language of that farmhouse kitchen, still hears the hymns, still smells the choufle pie. 63 years of English, and my dreams never converted. They stayed plain. They stayed home. You might not be Amish. You might never have set foot in a buggy, but I think you understand what I'm telling you. Everyone has a first language, not the one you speak, the one that speaks you. It's the frequency your soul was tuned to before the world retuned it. And here's what I've learned. You can leave that place, but you cannot leave that language. It's deeper than memory. It's deeper than choice. It will outlast every decision you ever make. I used to think freedom meant choosing your own life, and it does. I chose mine, and I would choose it again. But freedom has a cost they don't print on the ticket. The cost is this. You will spend the rest of your life standing in the doorway between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. One foot in the house you left, one foot in the house you built. You live in the in-between. You are native to the silence between them. I don't tell you this so you'll pity me. I tell you this so you'll understand whatever choice you're standing in front of right now. The one where every option costs something precious. You will pay. There's a price on the other side. The question isn't how to avoid the cost. The question is, which cost can you carry? Which weight, when you're 82 and sitting alone by a window, will feel like it was worth its heaviness? I chose knowledge. I chose questions. I chose the library and the classroom and the vast, noisy, dazzling English world. And the weight I carry is this. I lost my mother's voice in the waking world. I only hear it now when I'm asleep. But I hear it. That's the thing. I still hear it. I keep that square of fabric on my nightstand. Every night before I sleep, I touch it. It's soft now, so soft the weave is almost gone. The little white flowers have faded to ghosts of themselves. But it's still here. She's still here. In the thread, in the texture, in the language my hands remember when they touch something she made. You know what I've never told anyone? Not David, not my children, not a single soul in 63 years. Every night, before I close my eyes, I whisper the bedtime prayer my mother used to say over me. In Pennsylvania Dutch, the same words, the same order, the same rhythm she used when I was 5 years old. And the world was the size of a quilt, and the only language I needed was hers. Ich bin klei, mein Herz ist rei, soll niemand drin wohne, als Gott allei. I am small, my heart is clean, let no one dwell in it but God alone. I say it in the dark, in Columbus, Ohio, 82 years old, a woman with a teaching pension and a bookshelf that stretches wall to wall. The words come out in Pennsylvania Dutch because that is where prayer lives in me, below English, below education. In the basement of my being, where the foundation was poured before I was old enough to hold a trowel. You're searching for something. Maybe you left a place, a family, a faith, and you've been running so long you forgot you were still carrying it. But I tell you, whatever you leave it with love. The leaving isn't what breaks you. What breaks you is pretending you were never there. It's trying to translate yourself so completely that you forget the sound of your own name in the voice of the woman who gave it to you. You can change your whole life. I'm proof of that. But you cannot change what you dream in. And maybe you shouldn't want to.